What are some of the myths and false narratives that are floating around out there right now that you would like to challenge or offer a broader narrative around?
I think so you mentioned earlier that you're not an expert in this. And I think for so many, it is very hard to speak up about this because they feel that they don't understand the 100-year-old history, the 75 years of occupation, the politics in the surrounding region. And I think that if you were to look onto Twitter or social media, you will have so many people who claim to have the answers for these issues. And their voices are so tough behind a screen. You know, they're so loud and they bark and they just dismiss a population of people so easily. And I think that you don't need to have an education in this, but you need to have a heart. You need to be human. You need to let go of your ego and your preconceived notions of everything you have heard. We have to understand that there is a very well-oiled propaganda machine that has been conditioning not just our generation, but generations before us to dehumanize Palestinians. So I give credit to those people who are able to, after all of that indoctrination, they are able to come forward and say what I believed was Judaism or what I believed was the way of my people was actually hurting another population, and it wasn't my faith. It was a political ideology. And for those people to stand up now to say free Palestine, I give those people the most credit. So I think that myth that this is a complex conflict, it's a situation that will never be resolved, that is one myth that I would just like to put to bed, because there are people suffering and there are people coming together, and it doesn't have to be like a versus. It's not we were just saying earlier, it's one person's freedom. It doesn't limit the other person's freedom. It's not pie. It's not, you know, something that only one population can have.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And I invite my viewers, if you're watching and maybe you are unsettled, maybe from the get-go, knowing what the theme is, there's something moving through you. I invite you to think about what happened in 2021 here in Canada when the first graves of Indigenous children were found at residential institutions. If that was brand new for you and you know something you'd never heard of before, and that was the first time that you were receiving and processing that news, and to think about how that felt, and to also remember that Indigenous communities always knew their children never came home, but nobody really listened. It's in the calls for truth and reconciliation. And to think about if it was possible that we didn't know that to be true, but now we do know that's true. It's to understand that the things that, you know, we hold as sacred stories can be shifted, that in light of new information, you know, we can't be supporting Indigenous liberation here in this country and not see the connection between what's happening, similar patterns like you're talking about, that you talked about the machine of media. And so really just inviting, you know, stay plugged into this conversation. Go have a cup of tea, come back to this, but stay connected to this conversation. What's another myth, Chantelle, you want to kind of take a moment to address?
I've been seeing this one a lot, that any demonstration in favor of Palestine, so when you see the Palestinian flag, that these are rallies that are either anti-Israel or pro-Hamas. Just right off the bat, not every Palestinian supports Hamas. And to come together for the liberation of Palestinians does not ultimately mean that they are all part of an extremist terrorist organization. And I want to be mindful of even using that word terrorist, because that's the oppressor's language. And these are resistance groups. In the Ukraine, we saw people who were fighting for freedom, and they were called freedom fighters. However, when you put on a keffiyeh and you're throwing rocks, essentially you are a terrorist. So I just want to be mindful and to point out that double narrative and that standard of what fair resistance or that right to defend yourself really looks like. So when you see these demonstrations out in the street and people are chanting to free Palestine, that's not death to Israelis. That's not a chant to end Israel. It's a chant to end the occupation and to end the siege, to end the blockade of life, essentially, for Palestinians, especially in Gaza, but for all around the world. That one really hurts, because whenever I see that many people waving our flag, I don't see terrorists. I see my brothers and sisters, and I see the world finally waking up after 75 years of occupation to stand up for a population who has been ignored. So be mindful of the media that you are consuming that is saying anything about Palestinians being anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic. We are Semites. We come from the same region. We all lived together prior to the state of Israel. We are against the political ideology of Zionism. That's the occupation that's been strangling Palestinians and has been creating this backlash and weaponizing Judaism, weaponizing this term of anti-Semitism so that no one can criticize what they are doing. So it's very easy to fall for the narrative that the mainstream media has been playing, to see these protests, to see people angry, and to connect them to a negative cause.